All right, so last time we talked about what motivation is and gave it a definition, and I gave you my definition for what motivation is, which is belief times desire is motivation. And I know it's not scientific, but it's the best I got, and it makes a lot of sense to me. And as I have worked on my habits, I've noticed that this mathematical formula, I guess, works just perfectly. So today we're going to talk about what happens in your brain when you're motivated. And to do that, we have to come to grips with the fact we don't understand it all at all. We have some ideas, but motivation is very elusive, and so we do know a few things, but we don't know everything that happens, all the areas in the brain that are activated, or what the neurotransmitters are that are used in motivation, or how it even is kicked off in the first place. If you're not motivated to do something, then how do you get motivated to do that thing? We just don't know, right? But we do know a few things. And we know that one of the main neurotransmitters that is used in motivation is dopamine. And so what happens, as far as I can tell, is that dopamine, which is produced in the ventral tegmental area, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, and it is released when motivation is needed. When you decide you want to do something, you need some motivation. And once that dopamine is released, it floods the brain, and a lot of it is picked up by the nucleus accumbens. Now, the nucleus accumbens is not one structure, it's a bunch of different structures in the brain, but they've just sort of lumped them all together and said this is the nucleus accumbens. And so there's lots of different things that happen in there, including accepting the dopamine, as well as using some of it for indicating pleasure, the feeling that you've done something good. So that's the nucleus accumbens, and it absorbs or uses, accepts a large amount of it. And through the nucleus accumbens, several things happen in the brain. First of all, it starts to rewire connections in your brain. It builds neurons and dendrites so that if there aren't any that need to be there, it also connects some that are there if they're not connected already. And it strengthens the ones that are useful for that action. So this is what dopamine is used for. It also helps to implant new neurons. They didn't think this used to happen, but they've shown that it does now, mainly in the hippocampus, which is your memory, right? So that's sort of what they understand that dopamine does. And then there's some extra dopamine that is used to, it's not used, I guess it is used. It's accepted by different structures in the brain that indicate pleasure. And these are the orbitofrontal cortex, the nucleus accumbens, like I said, because it's a large collection of structures in the brain, and the ventral pallidum. And again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but anyway, so those three areas are the main three areas that they know of that will accept dopamine and indicate to you, to yourself, that this is a pleasurable thing to do. Now, what happens as you develop a habit, right? Because when we talked about this yesterday, or last time, that if you have a lot of extra dopamine floating around your system, you feel really good, right? But if you have too much, then you start to get manic, right? You don't want to have too much dopamine in your system. You want to have just enough to get you motivated to do the action you want to do, and then feel good about it. So what happens is, as you keep doing that action, then there's less work to do because the dopamine has made those connections. It's done that rewiring. It has implanted that memory, and all these things start to happen already. So your nucleus accumbens doesn't need as much. So therefore, not as much of it is released into your brain. So as your dopamine comes down, then the pleasure centers doesn't have as much dopamine to actually accept. So therefore, your pleasure for doing the action drops. Now, you've all experienced this. And don't tell me you haven't experienced this. You do something for the first time, finally, successfully, you're really excited, right? It's just wonderful. First time you drove your car and parked it in a parking spot downtown, or when you were a little kid, when you first turned on a light bulb and turned it off, right? These things were exciting at the time. Now, how exciting is it to drive your car from home and back, right? It's just not exciting. Turning the light switch on and off, you don't even feel it. But there is dopamine released into your system even when you turn the light on. It's the motivation neurotransmitter, or one of them. So if you have a little bit of dopamine, then you have enough if you have the belief that you can do it. And the only way you can have that belief is if the dopamine has done the work, done the rewiring in your brain, and get it all set up. So all you have to do is go light switch, click, light, good, perfect. That's it. Right? That's where you want to be. When you develop actions into habits, you don't want to always have that high, a rush of dopamine when you've accomplished the goal, because if it's a habit, you're going to be doing it regularly. You don't need all that dopamine. All you need is enough to get motivated to do the action. And as your desire comes down, your belief goes up, and your motivation stays steady. That's the point. So since there's less work needed, there's less dopamine in the system. Your feelings of pleasure drop, right? But you don't need it to be super excited about doing something, because it's just automatic. You do it already anyway. You need less energy to perform it, so therefore you don't need as much dopamine in your system to actually do it. The first time you drove your car down the highway, you were probably pretty freaked out. Everybody is. You're going really fast. But now, if you had that same energy drain when you're driving down the highway, then by the time you got to work, you'd be exhausted, right? You're not exhausted. You just do it because there's really little energy that you use in that process. So this is what you want. You want the dopamine to come down, and you want the belief to go up. That's what you want. Because if you don't have that, then you end up manic, and you don't want to be manic. So, since it takes energy to produce dopamine, and you don't need as much dopamine, then your energy requirements go down. Since it takes energy to make connections all over the place when you are first new at something, then as that gets streamlined, it's much easier, right? Draw an analogy between hiking and bushwhacking. I don't know if you've ever gone hiking on a well laid out trail. You put your pack on, you walk from one campsite to the next campsite, you stay on the trail. It's nice and easy, fairly easy anyway. Even if you have a 40-pound pack on your back, you can walk through it. You don't have to worry about getting lost. Just keep on going, right? How about if you get lost and you end up bushwhacking? You ever tried bushwhacking through the bush without any trail? You're moving branches out of the way, you're stepping on them, you're cutting them if you have a machete, and it's a lot of work to do. Well, this is what's happening at the beginning. And the first part was the hike from one camp to the next, is what's happening after it's a habit. That's what you want. All right, so next time we're going to talk about why motivation is important and what you're going to use your motivation for. Surprise, there's more than one thing you can do with your motivation, and we're going to get into what the good uses for the two types of motivation that I'm going to talk about, what they're good for, and we will discuss how to use them to your advantage.